Okay, so how many of you are familiar with Star Wars? I'm sure that there's quite a few of you out there that have seen the films. Even those that have never seen the films have still heard the names once or twice. Now, what about if I mention Darth Vader? Maybe you have a good Darth Vader impersonation. Or perhaps you're into some of the more modern films and modern characters such as Kylo Ren after seeing dozens of TikToks dedicated to him. But let's discuss FN-2187. And okay, that one's a hard one to pinpoint. But what about Finn? If you watch the newer films, I'm sure you've heard that name once or twice. And that's where our problem lies. If you ask anyone to name some of the more iconic Star Wars characters, they'll quickly list off characters such as Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Kylo Ren, Han Solo, Rey, and even characters that nobody even liked, such as Jar Jar. But the problem with that is this. Sure, it makes sense to name older characters because they're part of some of our older favorite movies that have been there for ages. And then sure, it makes sense to name some of the newer characters because I'm sure that there's people that have seen the newer movies more recently. But what about Finn? You know, Finn, the character that Disney initially made out to be one of the biggest characters in the newest additions to the franchise. And it was Finn, the character that we were first introduced to via the teaser trailer for The Force Awakens. It wasn't Kylo Ren, and it wasn't Rey, but it was Finn. One would think that after having such a large gap between the trilogies, Star Wars would make sure that the first character that we are introduced to is the character. What do I mean by that? He was meant to be the character, our new Luke Skywalker, our new Anakin/Darth Vader. Instead, Finn was quickly pushed aside and was made out to be a modern-day Jar Jar, and his character would also receive some of the worst character development in Star Wars history. This goes beyond just being a character, however. It is evident that John Boyega has received horrible treatment from Disney, from Star Wars, from fans and critics, and overall has just received terrible treatment throughout his whole lifetime. But let's backtrack a little bit. To start off, let's discuss Boyega's time with Disney. If you were to question who John Boyega was prior to Disney, that would be a hard question to answer. Prior to Disney, John Boyega was not a well-known name, and even after, it really wasn't for a while. This was a man who hadn't worked on a project so massive before, and now he was expected to be a part of one of the biggest franchises in the world, or one of the biggest franchises. He was quite literally the first face we were introduced to when the new trilogy was revealed. In the teaser trailer that I mentioned prior, we can see Finn take up the whole screen in the first few seconds. All we see is a whole bunch of sand and just Finn, right there, right in front of the screen. He was literally the first character that we've been introduced to in a very long time. And sure, we can argue that just because he was the first character that we are introduced to, it doesn't mean that he was meant to be the main character. But the problem with that is that even if he wasn't, he still didn't receive the proper character development that other characters did. Kylo received character development. So did Rey. They were created from these small characters that we have never heard of before to these more important icons within the movies. But that wasn't the same for Finn. In an interview with GQ, Boyega says this: "What I would say to Disney is do not bring out a black character. Market them to be much more important in the franchise than they are, and then have them pushed to the side." And he's right. Why make a big deal over bringing in a black character and making him out to be a titular character only to scrap that idea shortly after? It's as if Disney used a minority for bait and then decided to appease to the general audience and critics instead. And it's sad, because there is no argument that can help justify the thought that casting a black lead would lead to a box office disaster. A quick look at the trailer for Black Panther would prove that. If a massive franchise like Marvel can make a primarily all-black movie, then why couldn't we get a black lead in Star Wars? Both franchises are under Disney, so it doesn't make sense as to why they would favor one over the other. Not only that, but the positive reaction and impact that Black Panther made on its audience simply proves that Star Wars fans were more than ready for Finn. Well, counter-argument. Not all Star Wars fans were ready for Finn, or John Boyega. Even Boyega himself was aware of this, and now shares his previous experiences in interviews. In his own words, "I'm the only cast member who had their own unique experiences of that franchise based on their race." Let's just leave it like that. It makes you angry with a process like that. It makes you much more militant. It changes you, because you realize, I got given this opportunity, but I'm in an industry that wasn't even ready for me. Nobody else in the cast had people saying they were going to boycott the movie because they were in it. Nobody else had the uproar and death threats sent to their Instagram DMs and social media saying, black this and black that, and you shouldn't be a stormtrooper. Nobody else had that experience, but yet people are surprised that I'm this way. That's my frustration. Which brings me to my next point. Boyega faced backlash from fans simply for being who he was. Despite being a horrible experience, it's somewhat comical to think about that fans both wanted him to be thankful that he was even considered to be a part of the film, but they still don't want him to be a part of the films. It's like, can this man ever do something right in their eyes? It's like the color of his skin was a bigger deal than a bunch of made-up characters that were being introduced to the films time and time again. The argument goes beyond Star Wars, however. It stems from the belief that, as a whole, we, as a society, owe Boyega and other people that are part of minorities a massive apology. Star Wars owes Boyega an apology. Hollywood owes Boyega an apology. We, as fans and critics, owe Boyega an apology. As he says, every black person here remembers the time when another person reminds you that you were black. He says, I need you to understand how painful this is. I need you to understand how painful it is to be reminded every day that your race means nothing, and that isn't the case anymore. To be a minority is to be a part of something that you will constantly be reminded for the rest of your life. You're different. Not really, but society wants to make you believe that you are. You don't belong. That's not really true, but society wants to remind you that that should be the case. And to add to that, what makes you different is what makes you not worthy enough to be in a film. You know, a film where there's literal creatures that were made up by a bunch of different writers. The idea that just because you are a person of color and you can't be in a Star Wars film is insane. You have aliens and weird creatures, yet somehow the color of your skin means that you can't be a part of that. And not only that, this film is under Disney. Disney created Black Panther, and sure, we can argue that in Black Panther, this is a character that has been established for a long time in the comic books, and that's all fine and well. But again, it goes back to, why would we make Finn out to be this very important character and a big deal, only to say, well, maybe we don't need him anymore. Maybe this wasn't the right character for us. If that was the case, what Disney should have done and what Star Wars should have done is not made him a big deal to begin with. That is just using him as bait in order to bring people in order to bring in new audiences, only to ditch the character to appease to people that perhaps wouldn't feel okay with having a black lead. And to add to that, during the Black Lives Matter protests, Boyega shone as he delivered a raw and moving speech expressing his feelings on racism towards others and himself. Or at least, that's what someone said in an interview. You can hear and feel the pain in his voice, a reminder that this man has dealt with racism all his life, and now he has been robbed from quite possibly one of the best experiences an actor can have. But let's backtrack. Let's go back to the Black Lives Matter protests. If you quickly do a Google search on Black Lives Matter and John Boyega, you can see this video on a speech where he makes that's so passionate and so raw and so moving. And you can feel the pain in his voice. You can feel the hurt. But at the same time, you know, it's a reminder that to Hollywood and to fans and critics, you will never be enough. And that is the problem that we have. But once again, Star Wars and Hollywood owe both Finn, the character, and John Boyega a massive apology. There was no reason to market him as the main character, only to scrap that idea soon after. It is an insult to both fans and the actor and society. Also adding on to that, the apology is the awareness that we must bring to how fans treat newcomers that are also minorities. It is disgusting to see how fans can openly welcome creatures and droids, but somehow draw the line at someone who doesn't have the quote-unquote right skin tone. Last but not least is the notion that Boyega is human, but he is also a person of color, and like him, every person of color deserves respect and equality.